Welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to share with you a little bit about the editorial process for any given novel. So I will break down kind of the terms and what they mean when it referring to like the different types of editing that you might need to do. And bear in mind, I'll go in chronological order. It's very important to follow this order. Essentially, we're going big picture to small picture so that you don't introduce small picture errors when you're adjusting the big picture, and that you would then have to like repeat editing for longer than necessary. Okay, so starting out, you finish your drafting stage. And different authors will have different sort of standard practice. Some people use alpha and beta readers, some people don't. It's generally accepted that you should at least be using at least one round of beta readers. Most people suggest more. But once you are ready to do like edits, the first step that you may or may not take is a manuscript critique. This is a paid service. It costs about the same as a copy edit. We'll get to what that is later. A manuscript critique is essentially a big picture critique. This is generally a paid service. You don't want to just have a friend do it. So people will look at the structure, the characters, the readability of your work, kind of tell you what state is this manuscript in. A manuscript critique is great for people who are less experienced or for people who just really, for whatever reason, want to nail this particular book. And now if you want to nail every book, they can be helpful every single time. They typically will not give you solutions. A manuscript critique's purpose is to tell you where the problems are so that you can then address them, and to tell you what your next editorial steps are. You might get a manuscript critique back that says you don't even need a developmental edit. This story is great. Move forward with the next kind of editing. And then again, you might not. Yeah. So manuscript critique would come first if you're going to do that. This is one that not everyone does. So after manuscript critique comes a developmental edit. This is assuming you did a manuscript critique. Some people skip that. A lot of indies do their own developmental edits. This can be where a critique partner can really help you. Beta readers too. Beta readers are great for the developmental edit stage. So essentially you are looking at your story structure, your character arcs, you're looking for plot holes, you're looking for inconsistencies. Does your novel even make sense? Where can you strengthen it? What scenes are just not needed? What scenes need to be strengthened? That kind of thing. So this is where a novel starts looking a lot tighter, a lot more realistic. The language might still not be perfect, but this is the big picture. And again, if you pay someone to do your developmental editing, it is going to be the most expensive version, and that is because it is the most intensive. A developmental editor is worth what they charge. Okay? This is assuming you go to a real editor, not just some random person who loves books. A developmental editor may not be in your budget, but if they are worth it. Yeah. So then after developmental edits, we move on to line edits. Line edits, I think, is one of the ones that people get a little more confused about. And line editing is kind of focused on the voice and the flow, the readability of the words. So this is not scene level. We've gone down to line level. This is sentence structure. This is word choice. This is making the words pretty, essentially. So this is where you will get the feel of your prose. This is where you strengthen your voice. This is where you make sure all your characters have the correct voice. Line edits are essential, and every author should be doing them, whether they do their own or hire someone. This is not a step to skip, period. And it, again, is one of the more expensive types of editing to hire someone. Like, it can be almost twice as much as, like, a copy edit, but that doesn't mean it's not worth it. I know a lot of authors are a little hesitant to hire someone to line edit because they don't want to lose their voice in the book, and I totally understand that. I've had those feelings myself. I actually did do my own line editing for Showing Silver. If I had an unlimited budget, I don't know that I would do my own line editing. I would make that decision per novel. But a good line editor will not try to erase your voice. Their goal is to strengthen your voice, strengthen your characters' voices. They are not trying to turn your book into the book that they would write. A good editor never does that. A good editor turns your book into the best version of what you were trying to write. Because we're all flawed. We're all going to write an imperfect draft. Nobody has ever sat down and written a perfect first draft, no matter what anyone tells you. So, yeah, line edits are essential, but they always, always, always come after the developmental edit stage, because if you change the line, the flow, and the voice, and your voice is perfect, and then you go back and you're like, I have to change this whole scene to be something else, and there's a plot hole here I have to fix, and this character's motivation makes no sense. Then in fixing all of those things, you're going to introduce a ton of new stuff that needs to be line edited, and maybe you did a whole line edit on a scene that needs to be cut. So that was a big waste of time. It's that kind of thing. That's why we go in order. Okay. After line edits, we're getting to copy edits. Now, copy edits are probably the thing that most non-writers think of when they think of editing. Copy edits are fixing the grammar, fixing the spelling, catching word misuse errors. Sometimes a copy edit will also catch just factual errors. If you talk about copy editing for journalism, that is one of the things that copy editing does, is they catch, they do like fact checking. That's not always true for fiction, because a lot of times it's just a different situation, but that is part of the purview of copy edits. Now, copy edits is where you get into style guides. If you've heard that term, typically this is like if you went back when you were in school and they said you need to write an MLA style for your English essays, or all the science stuff has to be APA. Fiction almost always uses the Chicago Manual of Style. I have a little cheat sheet here that I use when I'm doing copy edits. So I don't know. Yes, I have mentioned that on this channel. I have my small publisher and I do freelance edits. So I do Manuscript Critiques, copy edits, and then sometimes formatting, but I don't really consider that an editorial service. But I don't do line edits or developmental edits. Those are very intense. And I don't consider myself qualified. I'm qualified for Manuscript Critiques via tons of experience, and I am qualified for copy edits because I took classes about it. Yeah. And I generally, unless an author specifies that they don't want to use the Chicago Manual of Style, I always use that because that is preferred by most publishers, and most indies are trying to fit in with other books to some extent. So that's what we go with. This may be the big source of the Oxford comma debate. If you are in fiction, the Oxford comma is recommended. In the Chicago Manual style, the Oxford comma is recommended. If you don't know what an Oxford comma is, it is when there's like a group in a sentence. So it'll be like orange juice and bacon and toast. The third item will have a comma. And then, so it's not recommended for APA, which is typically used in journalism. So if you read a lot of magazines or articles and stuff like that, you're probably less used to the Oxford comma than if you read a lot of fiction. Or I think it might be used in nonfiction too. So if you read a lot of nonfiction, you might not be quite as fanatical about the Oxford comma. If you read a lot of fiction, it's more likely to be something you love. And that was our little copy editor nerd out, and we will move on to proofreading. Okay, before you proofread, you format your novel. This is important. Copy edits, formatting, then proofreading. Because a proofreading is almost like a light copy edit. Not quite the same. Don't get me wrong. A proofreader will catch formatting errors. That's why you format your book first. But then they also catch little typos that snuck through. Their job is to make sure that everything in your book is perfect. I do not recommend skipping a proofreader. I would never recommend skipping a proofreader. Proofreaders are awesome. So the steps again, final reminder of the steps. We have Manuscript Critique, which not everyone does. Although I would recommend, even if it's just you, doing your own version of a Manuscript Critique before diving into self-edits is a really good idea. Kind of figure out what you need to change, what's your game plan. It can be very, very helpful. And then next comes Developmental Edit, then Line Edit, then Copy Editing, then Formatting, which is not technically editing, but formatting comes before proofreading. Okay, if you are looking for an editor, of course I recommend Night Sky Publishing. Just go to nightskypublishing.com. But if you want a different editor and you're looking for someone who is maybe affordable, even though I started editing on Fiverr, I would not ever recommend hiring someone who's on Fiverr. I know there are absolutely good editors on Fiverr. I'm sure they're there. But there is also a certain can I get away with it attitude among a lot of sellers on Fiverr. They don't always give the best services. And there are other places like Fiverr that are also kind of the same deal. Fiverr is just the one I'm familiar with because I was a seller on there. And I tried to give my best services. I always had 5-star reviews, but not everyone does that. So if you're looking for an editor, a good place to do it is like if you open up a book, sometimes in the acknowledgments, it will list the editor. Like if you open up, generally an indie book is a better place to go because a lot of the traditionally published books, the editors are full-time at a publishing house. But sometimes the editor will be listed in the acknowledgments. So that is a great place to go. You can go to Facebook groups and that kind of thing and ask other authors, do they have a editor they can recommend, one they trust, one who's familiar with your genre. Personal recommendations, I haven't used her, but I do think that Enchanted Ink Publishing has a really excellent reputation, so I would have no hesitation whatsoever about hiring them if you can get in. I know Readsy generally has a fairly decent reputation, but again, I've never used Readsy. And I've always kind of thought some of their services were a little pricey. Yeah, but those are my recommendations. Of course, I recommend Night Sky for copy edits and manuscript critiques. Manuscript critiques are actually my favorite thing to do. Yeah, so that is pretty much all of the editing terms. Other terms that you may have heard that you're not familiar with: alpha readers. This is really just a trusted first reader. It's not anything formal, so this might just be like your sister, your mom, your cousin, your best friend, someone that you trust to read a very early draft. Know that it won't sneak out and be out in the world in that format. And know that they won't come to you with criticism so harsh you can't handle it. So, alpha readers, not everyone uses them. Some people do. I have at times used the cheerleader version of that. Sometimes an alpha reader is literally just a cheerleader. You give them a chapter of your book, they would cheer you on. They're like, oh, this is so good, I need to read the next chapter. Write it. Because some people need that little push to actually keep writing. The next one was beta readers. Most people are familiar with that. This is usually free. Sometimes it's paid. I actually do paid beta reading. So typically a beta reader will read your book and give you feedback. Sometimes you give them a questionnaire. Sometimes it's just them telling you what stood out to them. I would not recommend skipping beta readers. They are a little hard to find, but you can usually find them somehow. I used people I know. Some people, there are services that exist that are like beta reading services. Beta reading is one that you could probably get away with doing through Fiverr. I would watermark your manuscript, but yeah. And then what's the other one that people don't always know? Critique partner. This is usually another writer. Genre is less important for a critique partner because usually you'd expect another writer to understand that you're not writing in this with the same expectations, and they should at least be semi-familiar with your genre. So usually, like, fellow writers give a very different style of advice than the average beta reader would. Also to note, in a critique partner, it is a mutual exchange relationship. This is generally free, except that you're giving them the same service. So you might trade a chapter, or you might trade a whole manuscript. But if you have a critique partner, if you ask someone to act as a critique partner, you should expect to do the same thing for them. And then I think the last word, editing-ish word, that some of us may not be familiar with is ARC Reader. This stands for either Advanced Review Copy or Advanced Reader Copy. So an ARC Reader will read the finished work. This is not an editing service, but you may have heard it listed among them. So they read the completed work before it's published, and then as soon as it's published, you have reviews up. Because the ARC readers will review the book. Now, you cannot require that they review the book. Basically, you give them a free copy and you ask for an honest review, but it cannot be a requirement. So ARC readers operate on just like kindness, I guess. And yeah, they get a free book out of it, but they also can give you a 1-star review if they want to. They can give you no star review if they want to. So if you want a certain number of reviews on your book, you have a goal for that. I would say get at least twice as many beta readers, ARC readers, maybe even 4 times as many as the number of reviews you want, because most of them are not going to leave your overview. That's just the reality. And this may be different if you have, down the line, you may be reusing the same ARC readers who are all great ARC readers and will leave reviews, but when you're first starting out, it's hard to find good ARC readers. Yep, so that is all of the terms I had for you today, and I hope this video helped. If there's any other terms you hear thrown around the writing community that you just don't know what they are, feel free to ask in the comments. Or if you have any questions about these different types of edits, you want any clarification, again, just throw it down in the comments. I will address all of them if I can, or as many as I can.